Sit down, loser. That's how President Donald Trump opened his assault on Jasmine Crockett inside a packed hearing room. But here's the truth. Over 72 million Americans have witnessed racial injustice firsthand. And tonight, one woman stood up against the most powerful man in the country. Trump came armed with insults, power, and arrogance. Crockett walked in with nothing but her voice and evidence strong enough to shake the nation. What followed wasn't just a hearing. It was a clash of truth versus power, justice versus corruption. And in the next few minutes, you'll see why this moment is already being called the most explosive political showdown of the decade. The gavel struck once. The chamber fell into an uneasy silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like a storm gathering before it breaks. And then, before the chairman could even finish his opening words, President Donald Trump leaned forward, smirk curling at the corner of his lips. His voice cut through the room like a blade. Who even let her in here? A nobody, a pathetic face in the crowd. Gasps rippled across the hearing room. Cameras clicked. Pens froze above notepads. Even for Trump, it was brutal. But that's exactly what he wanted. A headline in the first minute. Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. Her eyes locked on him, steady as steel. Her voice, low, sharp, and deliberate, sliced back. And who let you abuse power for so long? Mr. President, you're nothing more than a tyrant in a suit. The words detonated. The chamber erupted. Reporters scrambled, phones lifted high, microphones catching every syllable. Supporters of Trump hissed and muttered. Others, desperate for someone to stand up to him, roared with applause. The chairman's gavel thundered again. Order! Order in this chamber! He barked. But order had already slipped away. Trump leaned back, pretending to laugh, shaking his head as though she were beneath him. But his eyes, sharp, narrow, almost trembling, betrayed something else. Anger. A man unaccustomed to being challenged so directly. He pushed forward again, his voice louder this time, dripping with disdain. You call that courage? I call it desperation. Sit down, loser. The insult hung in the air, venomous, designed to belittle, to break her. But Jasmine didn't sit. She rose, slowly, deliberately. And when she stood, she commanded the room. Her voice cracked like thunder. I will not sit, not for you, not for corruption, not while justice is strangled by arrogance and lies. The room exploded, shouts, gasps, reporters stumbling over each other. The air was alive with electricity. Trump slammed his palm against the table, a sharp crack that echoed like a gunshot. He leaned so close to the microphone his breath hissed across it. His face flushed crimson. His words spat like fire. I will crush you, Crockett. I will grind you to dust in front of this entire nation. Every camera in the chamber zoomed in. Every lens caught the tremor of rage in his voice. Every journalist in the gallery knew they had their headline. This was not a hearing anymore. This was a war. Jasmine's lips curved just slightly into a defiant half-smile. Not a smile of mockery, but of resolve. Of a fighter who had already chosen her battlefield. The chairman struck the gavel again, but it was useless. The lines had been drawn. The war of words had begun, and the nation was watching. This was only the first volley. The sparks before the inferno. And if you think that opening exchange left the chamber shaken, wait until you see the next blow land. Because what Jasmine Crockett unleashed next would make history. Before we dive deeper, make sure you subscribe to Harrison Stories so you never miss the moments that shake power, expose injustice, and remind us why truth still matters. The chairman's gavel hadn't even cooled when Trump leaned in again. This time, there was no smirk, no charm, no disguise. Only venom. His voice cracked like a whip, fast and brutal. One accusation after another hurled across the chamber. Jasmine Crockett is nothing but a fraud. She's never built a business, never led a nation, never carried the weight of real responsibility. She is weak, she is reckless, she is a puppet for radicals. The words fell like hammer blows, each one designed not to argue but to annihilate. The chamber rattled with murmurs, heads shaking, whispers spreading like wildfire. But Trump wasn't finished. He leaned closer to the microphone, each word sharpened to cut. She talks about justice, But where was she when communities collapsed? Where was she when jobs left this country? She was too busy chasing headlines to do real work. The crowd erupted. Trump's supporters clapped, jeered, some even shouted, "Tell it!" from the gallery. It felt less like a hearing and more like a rally, a theater of power where humiliation was the weapon of choice. And Jasmine was the target, but she did not shrink. Her fingers tapped the desk, steady, calm, deliberate. She waited. She let the storm swirl around her until Trump's voice, hoarse and hungry for dominance, finally broke into silence. Then she struck. Her tone was sharp, but it carried something his did not: control. "Mr. President, I will not waste this chamber's time defending myself against your insults, because this isn't about me. This is about you and the trail of broken promises you left behind." The shift was instant. The room leaned in. Jasmine's voice grew louder, stronger, hammering each point like a boxer landing jab after jab. "You promised the forgotten men and women of America prosperity. Yet under your watch, working families drowned in debt while billionaires celebrated record profits. You swore to defend the Constitution, yet you trampled it whenever it stood in your way. You claimed to lead with strength, yet every decision you made was rooted in fear. Fear of losing power, fear of losing control, fear of being revealed." The chamber shook again, but this time with cheers from the other side. A chorus of "That's right," and "Tell him," rose from Jasmine's supporters. Cameras swung wildly, capturing faces flushed with excitement, anger, awe. Trump slammed his hand against the table, cutting her off. "Lies! Pure lies!" he barked. But Jasmine did not let him breathe. She pushed forward, voice cutting clean through his interruption. "Don't interrupt me, Mr. President. I'm not finished exposing you." The audience gasped. It was a rare sight. Someone talking over Trump, silencing him with nothing but conviction. The two collided like gladiators, trading words instead of blows. He accused, she countered. He mocked, she dismantled. Every second was a swing, a dodge, a strike, a counter. It was not a hearing anymore. It was a ring, a political boxing match broadcast to millions. Every round hotter, sharper, more dangerous. Trump lunged again, his words dripping with scorn. "You dare lecture me? You've never built anything. You've never commanded an army. You've never held the nuclear codes." Jasmine stepped closer to her microphone, unshaken. "And yet here I stand, Mr. President. Not with wealth, not with weapons, but with the one thing you cannot buy, bully, or bend: the truth." The gallery roared. Flashes of cameras blinded. Journalists shouted over one another. The energy was intoxicating, the kind that makes history feel alive. Trump shook his head, pointing at her like a prosecutor cornering a defendant. "You're nothing. You're irrelevant. And when this is over, no one will even remember your name." And Jasmine delivered the line that froze the room. Every syllable deliberate, her voice carrying like a verdict. "You can insult me. You can scream over me. You can even threaten me. But there is one thing you cannot do. You cannot run from the truth." The chamber erupted into chaos, half in rage, half in thunderous applause. The chairman's gavel pounded helplessly, his voice drowned by the storm. This was no longer just testimony. This was theater. This was combat. This was America's deepest divide set ablaze before the eyes of the world. And Jasmine Crockett had just landed her first decisive blow. Trump leaned back in his chair, lips curling into that familiar grin. The grin of a man who believed himself untouchable. The kind of grin that said, "I am power, and you are nothing." He chuckled into the microphone, voice booming with practiced bravado. "Cute speech, really cute. But let me remind you, I am the President of the United States. I hold the nuclear codes. I command the military. I sign the laws. You're just another loud mouth trying to make a name off me." The chamber shook with laughter from his allies, echoing like applause at a campaign rally. Trump leaned forward again, pointing straight at Jasmine, his words soaked in disdain. "You don't belong in this room. You don't belong on this stage. This is my arena." The arrogance was suffocating, the confidence unshakable. Reporters scribbled furiously. the camera zooming closer, capturing the swagger of a president flaunting his throne. But Jasmine did not blink. Her eyes narrowed, her jaw tightened. And just as Trump laughed again, she cut in, her voice slicing through his sentence like steel on glass. Then let this nation see exactly what their president has done with that power. The room froze. Cameras swung in unison, reporters' ears perked, ready to devour what came next. Jasmine reached for a folder, thick, heavy, its edges bristling with documents. She opened it with deliberate calm, her movements theatrical, calculated. And then she held up a page, the text bold under the chamber lights. Here is your signature, Mr. President. Here are the policies you approved. The ones that stripped health care from veterans, gutted protections for workers, and handed billions in tax breaks to corporations while ordinary families drown. A murmur spread like a wave. Gasps, shouts, fingers pointing. The hearing chamber erupted into a storm of noise. Trump's smirk wavered, just slightly. For the first time, the mask of invincibility cracked. He leaned forward, voice rising, trying to claw back control. That's taken out of context. That's a distortion. Fake news. But Jasmine pressed harder, her words relentless. No context can hide the truth. These are your policies, your choices, your legacy. You call yourself a leader, but the paper trail tells a different story. The audience outside the chamber was already boiling. News outlets flashed the headline across screens. Crockett confronts Trump with hard evidence. Hashtags exploded on social media. Commentators scrambled to spin it. Inside, Trump's face reddened, his fist clenched on the desk. He tried to twist, tried to sneer, tried to pivot into mockery. So what? Every president makes tough calls. You wouldn't understand. You've never had to sit in this chair, never had to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. But his voice cracked mid-sentence. It was subtle, just a flicker, a tremor in the armor. But the cameras caught it, and Jasmine saw it. She leaned forward, eyes blazing, her voice low but unshakable. The weight you carried was not the people's burden. It was your ego. And when history writes this chapter, Mr. President, your arrogance will be your undoing. The chamber erupted again. Louder, fiercer, a battlefield of cheers and jeers colliding like thunder. The chairman pounded the gavel, but his voice was a whisper against the roar. Trump tried to speak, but Jasmine wasn't finished. She stood, holding the document high for all the cameras to see, her voice echoing like a verdict carved in stone. You can laugh, you can mock, you can hide behind your title, but you cannot erase the proof of your betrayal. The words detonated. The chamber exploded into chaos. Reporters shouting questions, allies screaming denials, opponents cheering with fists raised. And as Trump's face burned crimson under the relentless flash of cameras, Jasmine delivered the final nail, a line that split the air like lightning. You are not a president, Mr. Trump. You are a cautionary tale. The hearing room shook. It wasn't just a blow, it was a fracture. And the nation, watching from screens coast to coast, felt the crack reverberate. Jasmine didn't let the silence linger. She moved swiftly, like a fighter pressing the advantage after landing a clean strike. Her hand dipped back into the folder, and she pulled out another sheet, then another, then another. The papers slapped against the desk, sharp, deliberate. Each one was a wound waiting to be opened. Here is the contract you signed with corporate donors, pledging loyalty to profit over people. Here is the report showing veterans denied care under your watch, while your administration boasted about efficiency. Here are the communities poisoned by negligence, silenced because their pain did not serve your politics. Each revelation struck like a drumbeat, steady, relentless, impossible to ignore. The gallery buzzed with electricity, reporters darting their eyes from page to page, cameras zooming in on every damning word. Trump snapped. He slammed the table so hard the microphone screeched, his voice ripping through the chamber. This is treason. This is slander. You're a traitor to your country. The word traitor hung heavy in the air. It was the kind of word that carried history, blood, and exile. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She leaned in, her voice calm, sharp as a blade sliding into armor. Pointing out your lies is not treason. It's accountability. And if truth makes me a traitor in your eyes, then so be it. I'd rather betray your corruption than betray the American people. The chamber erupted. Some gasped in shock. Others cheered like they had just heard a gospel sermon. The chairman's gavel thundered, but his words drowned beneath the roar of clashing voices. Trump's face was flushed crimson, sweat gathering at his brow. He barked over her, desperate to drown her out. Fake, all fake. None of this is real. She's twisting everything. She's an enemy of the state. But Jasmine's tone only grew sharper, rising above his shouting like a tide swallowing fire. You don't get to define patriotism, Mr. President. Patriotism isn't blind obedience to a man. It's loyalty to justice, to equality, to the truth. And you, sir, have betrayed all three. The chamber felt like it might shatter under the weight of her words. Senators shifted in their seats, aides whispered in frantic tones, journalists typed furiously. The world was watching history unravel in real time. Trump leaned forward, jabbing his finger toward Jasmine as if he could stab her words out of existence. His voice was raw now, less a speech and more a scream. You think you've won? You think waving papers makes you righteous? I will expose you. I will tear the mask off your face for the whole world to see. His vow rang out, but the crack in his confidence was undeniable. The arrogance that had seemed untouchable just minutes before was faltering, collapsing under the weight of evidence. Jasmine stood her ground, eyes locked on him, her voice steady. You don't scare me. You never did. The truth is already standing in this room, and it's staring right at you. Trump froze, his jaw tight, his face pale despite the red burning across his cheeks. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the rarest of sights. A man who thrived on dominance, now visibly cornered. The chamber had turned, and for the first time, Donald Trump was on defense. Outside, the headlines blazed across every network. Crockett unleashes evidence against Trump. The chamber in chaos. Truth versus power. America divided. Inside, Trump clenched his fists, teeth grinding, his fury barely contained. But he forced the words out, dripping with venom. This isn't over. I will rip you apart. I will show this nation who you really are. The threat echoed, but it sounded less like dominance and more like desperation. Jasmine didn't even look shaken. She simply gathered her papers, stood tall, and let the silence fall where it needed to. And in that silence, the chamber knew. The truth was no longer hidden. It was exposed, raw, undeniable. This is the battle America cannot look away from. Make sure you subscribe to Harrison Stories, because every page of this fight matters, and the next twist will shake the nation even harder. The chamber was still vibrating with noise when Trump leaned forward, gripping the microphone with both hands. His voice dropped low, almost a growl laced with menace. You forget who you're talking to. I am the President of the United States. I hold power you can't even begin to imagine. And if I choose, I can end your career in seconds. The words weren't just insults now. They were threats. Raw, calculated intimidation. Gasps scattered across the chamber. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't coded. It was a president flexing his throne before the nation. Trump let the silence linger, then leaned back with that signature smirk. One call from me, and you'll be out of a job. Off this stage, erased from relevance. Remember that before you keep running your mouth. Sudhir, his allies howled with approval, pounding the tables, chanting his name like it was a rally. The room tilted toward chaos, but Jasmine only laughed. Not a soft laugh, not polite. A cold, sharp laugh that cut through the noise like glass shattering. She tilted her head, eyes locked on him, and delivered her words with the calm of a warrior who had already chosen the battlefield. Justice does not fear a throne, and I don't fear you. The roar that followed was volcanic. Half the chamber erupted in cheers, the other half in rage. The chairman's gavel cracked against the wood again and again, but the pounding was drowned by the storm. Trump sneered, shouting into the mic, his voice climbing higher with fury. You think you can talk to me like that? You think you can stand against the power of this office? Jasmine shot back instantly, her tone like a whip. The office is not your shield. It belongs to the people, and every time you use it to threaten, you disgrace it. The two voices clashed, colliding midair like thunder. Insults flew, accusations fired back and forth, sharp, vicious, escalating with every exchange. Trump bellowed over her, "You're a disgrace! You're a fraud! You're nothing but noise!" Jasmine snapped back, never flinching. "And you're a coward hiding behind power you never earned." The chamber was an inferno now. Trump's supporters stood, fists in the air, screaming, chanting, jeering. Jasmine's allies fired back with chants of their own, shouting her name, pounding the tables in unison. It was no longer a hearing, it was a battlefield. The chairman rose, hammering the gavel so violently the sound splintered through the microphones. "Order! I demand order!" he cried, but his voice was a whisper lost in the tempest. The insults sharpened, cutting deeper. Trump hurled words like weapons. "Traitor! Enemy! Liar!" Jasmine countered with precision. "Manipulator! Abuser! Coward!" Every line was a strike. Every retort was a counter. Every second pulled the nation further into the fire. Trump slammed his fist again, spit flying as he roared, "Mark my words, Crockett. I will bury you under the weight of this presidency. I will crush you in ways you can't even imagine." And Jasmine, standing tall amidst the storm, let a cold smile trace her lips. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her calm was more terrifying than his fury. "You've spent years trying to bury the truth, Mr. President, but you forgot one thing." The chamber leaned in, breathless. Even Trump's shouting faltered for half a second, curiosity slicing through his rage. Jasmine reached down, her hand sliding into a second folder, this one slimmer, darker, different. She placed it on the desk with deliberate weight, the thud echoing like a drumbeat. "I came prepared, and inside this file is something you never wanted the American people to see." The room gasped. Reporters shot forward in their seats, lenses focusing, pens trembling in their grip. Trump's face drained of color, the crimson rage paling into something else. Unease. The gallery roared with anticipation. This wasn't just defense anymore. This was offense. Jasmine let her fingers rest on the folder, not opening it yet, just letting the tension thicken until the air itself seemed ready to snap. Her voice was steady, deliberate, heavy with promise. "You've played your power card, Mr. President. Now it's my turn." The chamber exploded. Shouts, cheers, curses, the pounding of tables. The chairman's gavel was useless now. And for the first time, Donald Trump looked at Jasmine Crockett, not with mockery, not with arrogance, but with the flicker of genuine fear. The chamber seemed to lean forward with him, the weight of silence pressing down like a mountain. Every eye fixed on Jasmine's hand, resting atop that folder. And then she opened it. The first page hit the desk with a slap. Not just words, not just allegations. Documents, dates, signatures, numbers traced back to secret accounts, and then the photographs. Grainy, undeniable, time-stamped. Trump's name, his allies. Deals whispered in the dark, suddenly dragged into the light. The reaction was instant. Gasps, screams, chairs scraping against marble. Reporters clawed for their cameras. Even the chairman froze, his gavel hovering midair, powerless against the earthquake. Jasmine's voice cut through it, clear as a blade. "These are not rumors. These are not opinions. These are records, direct, unfiltered, untouched. And they trace corruption straight to the man sitting before us, the President of the United States." The chamber erupted like a bomb. Trump shot to his feet, his face crimson, sweat glistening under the hot lights. "Fake news," he roared, his voice cracking like a whip. "Lies, fabrication. This is a witch hunt, the biggest in American history." He jabbed a finger across the table, spittle flying. "You think anyone believes this garbage? You're pathetic, pathetic." But Jasmine didn't even blink. She took another sheet, raised it high, and let the cameras capture every detail. "Then answer this, Mr. President. Why does your signature appear here, authorizing funds that vanished offshore? Why do these dates align with private meetings you swore under oath never happened? Tell this chamber, tell the American people, Why the paper trail leads straight back to you. Trump opened his mouth, then shut it again. The pause was short, but deadly. That hesitation rippled across the chamber like a signal flare, and Jasmine pounced. Answer the question, right here, right now. No excuses, no shouting, just the truth. The room held its breath. Trump's allies shifted uneasily. His supporters still shouted, but their voices cracked with doubt. The silence stretched, thick, suffocating. Every second tightened the noose. Trump slammed both palms on the desk, his chair toppling behind him. It's all fake. Every last page. You doctored it. You set it up. Then prove it, Jasmine snapped, slicing through his rage. Her eyes locked onto him like iron. Show us the evidence that it's fake. Bring it forward. Otherwise, answer the damn question. The chamber roared with approval from her side. Even neutral observers leaned in, captivated, unable to tear their eyes away. Trump's breathing grew heavy, chest heaving like a cornered animal. He pointed again, his hands shaking with fury. You don't get to interrogate me. I'm the one in charge here. Jasmine's reply was ice. Not today. Today the truth is in charge. The words landed like a hammer. For a moment Trump looked cornered, stripped, exposed before the nation. And the gallery felt it too. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras flashed. The people watching at home were glued to their screens, feeling the tectonic plates of power shift. But then, the air changed. Trump's expression hardened. The panic faded, replaced by something else. Calculation. He straightened, smoothed his tie, and leaned into the mic with sudden calm. His voice dropped low, steady, almost chilling. You think you're clever, Crockett. You think you've got me backed into a corner. But you forgot one thing. I know things too. And I know things about you. The chamber froze. Jasmine narrowed her eyes, but she didn't move, didn't flinch. Trump let the moment stretch, savoring the suspense. You want to play this game? Fine, let's play. Because while you were busy digging through my life, I had people digging through yours. And let's just say, he paused, letting a sly grin curl his lips. The nation might not like what we found. The audience exploded again, but this time in confusion. Gasps, questions, shouting from both sides. The tide had shifted, if only slightly. Jasmine's hand tightened around the folder, her jaw set, her eyes locked on him like fire. But the atmosphere had changed. The hunter had struck back, hurling the scent of blood into the air. The hearing chamber, once united in outrage, now buzzed with uncertainty. What did he know? What could he possibly have? Trump leaned back, smug again, feeding on the chaos he had created. You exposed me? Fine. But it's time the world hears about you. And believe me, it's going to make headlines. The cliffhanger hung in the air like smoke. The chamber had gone from outrage to suspense, from fury to fear. The game had just taken a darker turn. And Jasmine Crockett, standing firm in the storm, knew one thing with absolute certainty. The fight wasn't just about exposing Trump anymore. It was about surviving the secrets he was ready to unleash. For a moment, Jasmine stood in the crosshairs of uncertainty. The gallery buzzed with whispers, some curious, some cruel. The seed of doubt had been planted. Trump leaned forward, grinning like a man who'd just played his ace. Oh, she looks nervous now. Look at her face. She knows what I'm talking about. Cameras zoomed in, desperate to catch a flicker of panic. Supporters of Trump roared with approval, pounding fists on tables, chanting his name. The room tilted toward him, his presence swelling, larger than life. He basked in it. You wanted to drag me through the mud, Crockett? Careful. You might drown in it yourself. I've got files, witnesses, stories, things that'll make your little crusade crumble. The words stung, not because they were true, but because they were designed to wound. They dripped with poison, crafted to turn perception into a weapon. Jasmine took it all in. Every smirk, every cheer, every sneer. And then she lifted her chin, eyes blazing like twin torches. Mr. Trump, she said evenly, her voice slicing through the noise. If you had any proof, any real evidence, you would have laid it on this table already. Instead, all you've got is smoke. And smoke is what men create when they've already run out of fire. The room hushed. a line so sharp it cut through his bluster like steel. Trump tried to interrupt, but Jasmine raised her hand and kept going. You see, the difference between us is simple. I came here with documents, records, undeniable truths. You came with insults, theatrics, and now, empty threats. That's not power. That's desperation. The audience gasped. Then applause began, hesitant at first, then swelling like a wave. Members of the gallery rose to their feet, clapping, shouting her name. Trump's smirk faltered. He pounded the desk, trying to regain control. They'll know the truth. They'll know what you really are. But Jasmine's voice roared above him, unstoppable now. No, Mr. Trump, they already know what you are. A man so afraid of accountability that he hides behind shadows and threats. A man who thinks intimidation is a shield. But shields don't stop the truth. They only slow it down. The chamber thundered with cheers. Even the chairman struggled to restore order, gavel hammering like a drum against marble. But the energy was out of his hands now. The people had chosen their champion. Trump's eyes darted around, searching for an ally, for a lifeline. But the tide had shifted. The more he shouted, the weaker he seemed. The more Jasmine spoke, the taller she stood. And then, with perfect precision, she delivered the line that broke the spell. You accuse me of secrets, Mr. President, but secrets are only dangerous when they're hidden. I live in the open. You, however, have spent your entire life building walls to hide behind. And tonight, those walls are crumbling. The chamber erupted. Cameras flashed like lightning. Commentators outside scrambled to rewrite their headlines. Trump opened his mouth, ready to spit fire, but nothing came. The words that had once flowed like a torrent now stuck, thick and heavy in his throat. His jaw clenched, his fists curled, and then, for the first time in hours, he went silent. The silence was louder than his shouts had ever been, a silence that spoke of doubt, of cracks in the armor, of fear he could no longer mask. Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She simply lowered her hand, gathered her papers, and let the moment hang. The crowd's cheers became deafening, echoing through the chamber like a victory march. Trump stared ahead, his face stiff, his eyes betraying a rare flicker of confusion. The man who had walked in with arrogance now sat in stunned stillness, his voice lost. And in that stillness, one truth became undeniable. The balance of power had shifted again. The battle was far from over. But for this round, Jasmine Crockett had turned the tide. And Trump snapped. The silence that had swallowed him a moment earlier shattered in an instant. His fist slammed against the table so hard the microphone shook. He leaned forward, eyes wild, voice booming with a fury that rattled the marble walls. You are a fraud, a liar, a nobody who thinks she can lecture me. Me, the President of the United States. The venom poured out, raw and unfiltered. Every insult, every slur, every shred of rage he had bottled up came roaring to the surface. The crowd gasped, some recoiling, others roaring with approval as if they were ringside at a prize fight. Trump didn't stop. He sneered, his words tearing through the air like barbed wire. You've never built anything, never led anyone. You're a disgrace, a parasite feeding off the system while I made this country great. You're nothing but a loudmouth puppet, and you'll be forgotten the second you walk out of here. The chamber quaked under his tirade. Even the chairman's gavel, hammering desperately, was drowned out. Order! Order! He cried. But the hearing had spun beyond his control. But Jasmine did not flinch. She did not retreat. She rose from her seat slowly, deliberately, her eyes locked on Trump with the calm of a warrior who knows the storm cannot break her. And when she spoke, her words carried like thunder. Mr. Trump, she said, each syllable sharp as glass, you mistake volume for strength. You think shouting makes you right, but all it shows is fear. And tonight, everyone in this chamber sees it. The mask slipping, the man beneath exposed. Trump's face twisted, but Jasmine pressed harder. You call me a fraud? Let's talk about fraud. Let's talk about universities that never existed, charities drained for your gain, deals signed in back rooms while Americans paid the price. Shall I keep going? The audience erupted again. Cheers, jeers, the clash of two armies colliding in sound. Trump tried to shout her down, but she cut straight through him, her voice unshakable. You call me a nobody? Then explain why a so-called nobody has you cornered, trembling behind insults instead of answers. Explain why, with all your power, you cannot silence me with facts, only with rage. The roar from the gallery nearly lifted the ceiling. Supporters of Jasmine rose to their feet, clapping, shouting her name. Even some of Trump's allies shifted uncomfortably, sensing the imbalance. Trump doubled down, desperation bleeding into his fury. You're weak! You're pathetic! You don't deserve to be in this room! But Jasmine only grew stronger. I don't deserve to be in this room? I earned my seat here, through the votes of the people who trusted me to speak for them. You, on the other hand, treat this chamber as your stage, this nation as your plaything, this presidency as your shield against the truth. Each word was a blade. Each phrase struck directly at his armor, peeling it back before the eyes of millions. The chairman had given up trying to restore order. He sat back helpless as history unfolded in real time. Reporters scrambled, headlines practically writing themselves. The greatest showdown in American political history. Words as weapons. Crockett versus Trump. But inside the chamber, it was more than a spectacle. It was a war. A war fought not with bullets, but with words that cut just as deep. Jasmine leaned forward now, her hand on the stack of papers she had carried all along. Her voice dropped low, commanding silence. You say I'll be forgotten, but you're the one who fears history, Mr. Trump. Because history doesn't remember the loudest. It remembers the truth, and the truth is sitting right here in my hands. The room froze. The applause quieted. Every camera locked onto her, every ear strained for her next word. Trump's face flushed crimson again. He shook his head violently, his voice cracking with desperation. No, no, you don't have anything. It's all fake, all lies. You won't get away with this. But his voice sounded smaller now, drowned not by volume, but by the weight of what was coming. Jasmine straightened, her hand tightening on the folder. The audience could sense it. The moment. The strike that would change everything. And as the chamber held its breath, she looked him dead in the eye. You've thrown every insult. You've screamed every word. But now, Mr. Trump, it's time to deal with evidence you cannot shout down. The room trembled, balanced on the edge of revelation. Jasmine Crockett was ready to unleash the blow that could end him. She placed the final folder on the desk. The sound echoed like a gavel. And then, with deliberate calm, she opened it for all the world to see. Inside were pages marked not by whispers or speculation, but by truth carved in ink. Bank transfers, wire logs, emails with digital signatures. One after another, each sheet stacked on the last like bricks in a wall too high to climb. Jasmine lifted the top page into the camera's hungry eyes. This, she declared, her voice resonant, unshakable, is the trail, a direct line from the highest office in this land to the darkest accounts offshore. Transactions signed by Donald J. Trump himself. Dates, amounts, destinations. This is not rumor. This is not hearsay. This is proof. The chamber erupted. Gasps collided with cheers. Reporters practically tripped over each other, typing furiously, shouting headlines into microphones. And across the scrolling tickers in every newsroom, one phrase began flashing like a siren. Trump trapped by Crockett. Trump staggered back in his chair as though struck. His mouth opened, closed, opened again, but no words came. For a heartbeat, the titan of bluster looked smaller, diminished, cornered. Then, clawing at composure, he shot to his feet. Lies! Fabricated, a setup. His voice cracked with strain. I don't know those documents. I never signed those papers. This is another hoax, just another witch hunt. But the chamber no longer believed him. The doubt that once lingered had been drowned in a flood of evidence. Even his staunchest allies shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting anywhere but toward him. Jasmine pressed forward, relentless. Every page authenticated, every signature verified, every transfer traced. And here it is, live before the American people. You can scream fake all you want, Mr. President, But facts do not vanish because you fear them. The applause that followed was thunderous. It shook the chamber, reverberated through the walls, and rolled out into the streets where crowds had gathered around screens. In homes across the country, viewers leaned closer, some in disbelief, others in awe. It wasn't just a hearing anymore. It was history. Trump tried again, his words tumbling over themselves, desperate, raw. This is an ambush. You set this up from the start. You're nothing but a puppet for the radical left. This entire hearing is a disgrace to democracy. His voice broke into a near scream, his face contorted with rage, spittle flying into the microphone. But the chamber drowned him out. Crockett! 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 The chant swelled, echoing off marble and wood, a chorus that felt less like a hearing and more like a revolution. For the first time, Donald Trump was not commanding the stage. He was losing it. Jasmine raised her hand, quieting the crowd without effort. Her gaze remained locked on him, unflinching, steady. This isn't about politics. This isn't about party. This is about the truth. And the truth, Mr. Trump, is that you abused your power, betrayed your people, and sold pieces of this nation for your own gain. And tonight, the nation sees it with their own eyes. The chamber roared again, drowning even the chairman's futile attempts at order. Cameras flashed in a storm of light. Journalists outside were already calling it the most damning moment of any presidency. Trump's hands gripped the edge of the desk so tightly his knuckles turned white. His chest heaved, his lips curled back, his eyes wild with fury and fear. And then he snapped, his voice tearing through the noise like a wounded animal. This is a political conspiracy, a dirty trap, an assassination of power. He jabbed a finger across the chamber, spitting each word like venom. You think you can destroy me with papers and lies? This is an ambush, a bloody, illegal ambush. But even as he screamed, his words fell flat. They were the cries of a man cornered, a man out of weapons, a man watching the empire he'd built collapse brick by brick. And Jasmine Crockett, calm in the storm, stood tall above it all. Her silence now spoke louder than his rage. The fatal blow had landed, and nothing would ever be the same again. But Trump refused to surrender. He clung to the microphone like a drowning man to driftwood, his face red, his breath ragged. You're all traitors, he bellowed, his voice breaking into a guttural rasp. This chamber is a sham. This process is a joke, and every one of you will regret the day you tried to bring me down. The chamber shuddered beneath the weight of his fury. His words, once weapons of dominance, now sounded desperate, unhinged. It was the roar of a king watching his crown slip from his head. Jasmine did not flinch. She stood, hands folded before her, calm in the maelstrom. Mr. Trump, she said coolly, her tone slicing through the noise like steel. This isn't a coup. This isn't revenge. This is accountability. And the louder you scream, the clearer it becomes that you fear the truth more than anything else. A wave of murmurs rippled across the chamber. For every insult Trump hurled, Jasmine returned a measured strike, her words cutting deeper than his rage could reach. He slammed his fist against the desk. Lies! You're nothing but a fraud, a mouthpiece, a low-level nobody propped up to attack me. Jasmine's eyes narrowed, but her voice remained steady. If I am a nobody, then why does the truth shake you so violently? If my words mean nothing, why do they strip away your defenses piece by piece? The audience gasped, some breaking into applause despite the chairman's desperate calls for order. It was no longer just testimony, it was a duel, a verbal battlefield where every word was a strike, every pause a parry. Trump leaned forward, spit clinging to his lips. You want to talk about truth? You don't know the first damn thing about sacrifice, about loyalty, about what it means to lead this nation. I built this country back up with my own hands while you and your cronies sat back and destroyed it. Ano. Jasmine stepped closer, her presence unyielding. Leadership isn't theft. Loyalty isn't exploitation. And sacrifice isn't selling your country piece by piece for personal gain. Her voice sharpened, fueled by conviction. You didn't build this nation, Mr. Trump. You tried to break it and profit from its rubble. The words struck like a blade. Trump recoiled, his expression twisted with rage. But no coherent response followed. Only more venom. You're pathetic. You'll never win. History will laugh at you, just as it laughs at this circus you call justice. Jasmine's reply was merciless. History does not laugh at truth. It remembers it, and it will remember you, not as a builder, not as a leader, but as the man who drowned in his own lies. The chamber erupted again, applause colliding with shouts, tension rising to a fever pitch. Some pounded desks, others yelled over each other. It felt as though the room might burst at the seams. Trump's voice cracked. His insults became jagged, incoherent fragments. Half threats, half pleas. Each outburst revealed more desperation, more unraveling. Jasmine, unwavering, answered each one with precise, deliberate words, striking not with fury but with truth sharpened into a weapon. It was no longer a contest. It was an execution by language. Every rebuttal left Trump smaller, weaker, his authority bleeding out in real time before millions of eyes. The air grew heavy. Every breath from the crowd seemed caught in their throats. The hearing room, once a stage for political theater, had transformed into an arena of survival, and when it seemed the chamber could endure no more, the gavel slammed down. "Order! Order!" The chairman's voice thundered above the chaos. The chants, the applause, the shouting, all crashed into silence. His eyes scanned the wreckage of the battle. Jasmine standing tall, resolute. Trump hunched, snarling, sweat beading on his brow. The chairman's words carried the weight of finality. "This council will recess briefly. Upon return, we will issue our judgment." The declaration struck like lightning. The room gasped in unison. It was the endgame. Trump pounded the desk once more, but his fury no longer reached anyone's ears. Jasmine remained still, composed, her silence more powerful than his rage. And as the chamber emptied, the world outside buzzed with a single truth. The final verdict was near. When the council reconvened, the air was so tense it seemed every breath might fracture it. The audience sat stiff, knuckles white around chair arms, as the chairman gestured for Jasmine Crockett to rise. She did so slowly, with a poise that made the silence vibrate. Her eyes swept across the chamber, then fixed firmly on the panel before her. "Ladies and gentlemen of the council," she began, her voice steady, commanding, "we have walked through every deception, every manipulation, every abuse of power laid bare in this chamber. What began as noise, what began as intimidation, has now been carved down to one undeniable truth. Donald J. Trump betrayed the trust of the American people." Her words hung in the air like a verdict before the verdict. She didn't need theatrics. Her tone carried the weight of every piece of evidence already revealed. Trump shot up, pointing an accusing finger. "Lies, all lies. This witch hunt is a disgrace to America. She's twisting the facts, poisoning your minds." The chairman slammed his gavel. "Order, Mr. Trump. You will wait your turn." But Jasmine did not wait. She took a single step forward, her voice slicing through his roar. "You call it a witch hunt, yet every document, every testimony, every pattern of corruption we've presented comes not from fantasy, but from your own record. If this is a hunt, then it is your deeds that lit the trail." Gasps filled the chamber. Even some of Trump's allies avoided his eyes. He tried again to interject, but his words faltered, stumbling beneath the weight of her precision. Jasmine pressed on. Her cadence quickened, every line landing like a drumbeat. "We have shown the misuse of office. We have shown the manipulation of allies and enemies alike. We have shown the betrayal of oaths sworn before this very nation. No shouting can erase that. No denial can bury it." The chamber vibrated with her conviction. It was more than argument now. It was declaration, a closing statement etched in fire. Trump clutched the desk, his voice cracking into desperation. "They want me gone because they fear me. They fear my power, my vision. She's just a puppet." But the crowd's energy had shifted. No longer were they hanging on Trump's bluster. Their eyes were locked on Jasmine, feeding off her certainty, her unshakable composure. She turned to the council, raising her voice for the final blow. "This case is not about party. It is not about rivalry. It is about whether truth matters, whether justice can still pierce through power. And if we falter now, if we allow corruption to escape accountability, then we will have surrendered the very soul of democracy. The words ignited the chamber. Applause erupted, deafening, breaking through the chairman's desperate pounding of the gavel. The walls themselves seemed to shake. And then, silence. The council leaned forward, conferring in low voices that felt louder than any outburst. Every second stretched like an eternity. Trump sat rigid, lips pressed tight, sweat streaking down his temple. For the first time, he looked small. At last, the chairman rose. His expression was unreadable, his voice slow, deliberate. This council has weighed the evidence, considered the arguments, and deliberated on the gravity of this matter. The room held its breath. Our judgment is unanimous. Donald J. Trump has been found culpable of abuse of office, betrayal of public trust, and obstruction of accountability. A collective gasp tore through the chamber. Trump's face collapsed, the bravado draining in an instant. He tried to stand, but his knees buckled, forcing him back into his chair. The chairman's voice cut deeper. Accordingly, this council recommends that Donald J. Trump be barred from holding public office henceforth. The explosion of sound was immediate. Cheers, tears, chants, thunderous applause. The chamber erupted into chaos. It was a tidal wave of release, the culmination of every word, every clash, every truth unleashed. Trump buried his face in his hands, muttering hoarsely, "No, no, this is rigged. This can't be happening." But the world outside had already seized on the news. Screens blared with the headline, "Trump falls, Crockett triumphs." Jasmine remained standing, her eyes unblinking, her chest rising with measured breaths. The victory was not loud for her. It was steady, resolute, the triumph of truth over fury. The chairman raised his gavel one last time. This session is adjourned. The echo of wood against wood carried like a bell of history. The chamber shook with celebration. Supporters surged forward, hands outstretched toward Jasmine, chanting her name, their voices colliding into a thunderous anthem. She allowed herself one small smile, not of gloating, not of arrogance, but of vindication. For in this chamber, under the weight of history, Jasmine Crockett had stood against the storm and won. It was a victory so absolute, so undeniable, that it echoed far beyond those walls. And it marked the day the balance of power in America shifted. Trump rose from his chair like a man whose body no longer obeyed him. His shoulders sagged, his steps uneven, his once thunderous presence reduced to silence. The cameras swarmed, flashes slicing through the chamber as he trudged toward the exit. No fists raised, no smirk on his lips, only the hollow stare of defeat etched across his face. Outside, chants clashed like dueling drums. Some roared his name, refusing to let go of the image of the strong man they worshipped. Others shouted with fury, "Justice! Justice! Justice!" Their voices rising like a wave breaking against stone. Trump did not turn back. He slipped into the shadows of the corridor, swallowed by history. Inside, Jasmine Crockett remained at her post, not gloating, not basking, but standing tall, shoulders squared, gaze fixed forward. Her presence radiated something greater than victory. It radiated justice made flesh. And in that moment, to millions watching from their screens, she became more than a congresswoman. She became a symbol. Headlines ignited across the globe in real time. Crockett crushes Trump. Justice prevails in historic showdown. America witnesses a shift in power. From New York to Los Angeles, from London to Tokyo, the world buzzed with the aftermath. Commentators shouted over each other on primetime broadcasts, dissecting every word, every gesture. In living rooms across America, families argued late into the night. Some called it the rebirth of accountability. Others raged that it was nothing but a political assassination dressed as justice. But beyond the noise, one truth was undeniable. History had been written, and Jasmine Crockett's name was etched into it. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse, cell phones raised, trying to capture a glimpse of her as she stepped out into the floodlights. And when she finally appeared, the scene was electric. The roar of applause shook the night air. Hands reached out as though to touch not just a woman, but a living emblem of defiance against corruption. Jasmine lifted her hand, not in triumph, but in acknowledgement. Her face was calm, almost solemn, as though she carried not just her own victory, but the weight of everyone who had ever demanded truth in the face of power. Tonight, she told the sea of cameras, her voice carrying effortlessly, was not my victory. Tonight was justice's victory for every citizen who has felt unheard, unseen, and betrayed. This is proof that the truth cannot be buried, not by money, not by power, not by fear. Her words rippled outward, broadcast live to millions. Some cheered through tears, others clenched their fists in anger, but no one could ignore them. Trump, meanwhile, slipped into a motorcade, windows tinted, his face a shadow. Rumors swirled within minutes. Would he fight back? Would he call his followers to the streets? Would this defeat ignite a new era of conflict? But in that hour, the stage belonged not to him, but to Jasmine. Across social media, images spread like wildfire. Her hand raised, her silhouette against the courthouse lights, her eyes steady and unflinching. They captioned her as the torch of justice. An icon was born. And yet, beneath the celebration, tremors of division cracked deeper into the nation. Neighbors turned against neighbors. Friends unfollowed friends. Families clashed at dinner tables. It was not just a verdict, it was a reckoning. But history does not wait for consensus. It records what is undeniable. And on this night, what was undeniable was that Jasmine Crockett had faced the most powerful man in America, and won. She returned home well past midnight, exhausted but unbowed. The chant still echoed in her ears, the lights still burned behind her eyes. But as she closed the door and leaned against the silence of her living room, a single thought cut through the storm. This was not the end. This was only the beginning. Because battles are fought in courtrooms, but wars are waged in memory. And she knew that her victory would be remembered, dissected, praised, and cursed. Long after the roar of this night had faded, the world had witnessed not just a clash of personalities, but a collision of ideals. And the image that remained, immortalized in headlines and history books alike, was clear. Jasmine Crockett, standing tall, her figure framed in light, a torch held high against the darkness. The torch of justice, the symbol of a nation's reckoning, the closing image of a battle that will be studied for generations to come. In the end, this was never just a clash between two voices in a chamber. It was the eternal struggle between power that seeks to bend truth and courage that dares to defend it. Jasmine Crockett's victory reminds us that justice is not born in silence. It is forged when ordinary people refuse to bow before arrogance, and when truth is spoken even at great cost. The lesson is simple yet timeless. Real strength lies not in titles or thrones, but in the unwavering commitment to what is right. If this story shook you, don't look away. Carry it, share it. Let it remind you that silence never wins. Like, comment, and send it to someone who still believes justice is worth the fight. Subscribe to Harrison Stories, where corruption is exposed and courage has a voice. Hit the bell, because the next reckoning won't be quiet. It will be fierce, and it might just reshape how you see power. This story is a fictional dramatization born from real struggles, real injustice, and the timeless demand for accountability. Any resemblance to actual people or events is symbolic, meant for reflection and critique. Thank you for watching. Justice doesn't arrive by accident. It rises when people refuse to bow. This is Harrison Stories.